Hi guys. This video, making it feels like I am a book reviewer on YouTube or something. I've never done one of these before. Oh my goodness. Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, my phone is being held by my typewriter, and I'm currently living in an attic. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about mostly chapter 10, because I found it to be the turning point in the book. I would like to hear if you disagree, but yeah, this is where I feel like the character Milkman really takes a turn in his life, because he has decided to seek after something that is kind of in his head, and it kind of changes, I think. I don't even think if he knows what he's really searching for, but we as readers can begin to recognize what he's actually searching for, which is his family past, and really just accepting who he is and who his family is, despite the history and the faults. But I want to first talk about how it starts. Yeah, it starts out by saying, by kind of paralleling Hansel and Gretel. And if you don't know the story of Hansel and Gretel, it's about two siblings who follow breadcrumbs to an old woman's house. And it looks really great. Like, it's got candy. The house is like a gingerbread house, but the old lady inside actually wants to eat the kids, so it actually ends up leading to their death. But instead of gingerbread, the writer talks about gold being what is leading him, instead of these breadcrumbs. And so Milkman decides that he wants to take this journey alone, which I found really interesting, because most of the novel, actually the whole novel, he hasn't been alone, but mostly with Guitar, that has been his closest friend. And he decides to take this journey alone, and they have a talk during that. That I feel like is one of the most important parts of the story. But anyway, back with the Hansel and Gretel thing. The Hansel and Gretel think that this journey is going to be one thing. They think that they are just going to follow these crumbs and it'll lead to this beautiful thing, but it was something worse. And I think there was a disappointment there, probably, because they ended up dying. But for Milkman, I think his disappointment comes from there has to be a death to the idea that he is going to be wealthy on his own, and that he kind of has to accept the world as it is. And there is a lot of brokenness that he has faced and trauma with his family, which we've read about in previous chapters. But yeah, I think that what he wants is what I think every human wants, which is to make something of themselves on their own, and the restraints that African Americans have on themselves prevent them from doing that. And so this is kind of a way to be free. What he gets is something very different than that. So anyway, before he leaves, he talks to Guitar, and what I think is really interesting is this line where he says that everyone wants a black man's life. They're not their life isn't killing them, but their living life. And he goes into immense detail about every relationship people can have and how they want to take from them. Yeah, I want to know what you guys think of that. I hope that we discuss it today in class, because I found it really, really interesting. And it was a big critique on how we treat black men in our culture, but also you see it, he might have explained it in black and white, here it is, this is how we're treating people, but you see it in every page of this book leading up to this point. You see it in how Milkman's father makes him kind of just become like him and use his life to reflect his own. And you see it in his relationships with Hagar, and you see it with even the white people. But yeah, I think Guitar is really good at being honest, and I think this book does a really good job at being honest. There were so many times throughout, even Milkman's internal dialogue on his way to visiting this old house in this cave, thinking through things and being more honest than most people. And yeah, like Guitar even calls out Milkman's dad in this, Malcolm Dead, and says that he is acting like a white man and trying to fit that mold instead of being who he is. And I feel like there are people who believe that the only way to be successful is to fit a mold. I know as women, sometimes we feel like we need to fit a mold of a man in order to succeed in this country, instead of being who we are and that being successful and creating a success. But that is also because the culture, like, a white man is what is successful in a lot of our history, and so it makes sense that Malcolm Dead is trying to fit that mold. Yeah, so let's talk about when he gets to this town, and he is so set that he is there to find gold and to bring it back. But all of his interactions are about the past, are about identity, are about memories. These people know his family, and there is a sense of, like, there's a scene where he's talking to people in town, and he's like, you know, he's mentioning people like Pilate and stuff, and they're like, oh, I know your people. And the fact, he even Milkman made a comment, like, to be in a foreign place and to be told that I am known and that they know my people is, like, gave him value. But the thing is that I don't even think Milkman knows his own people in a real sense, in a fuller sense. And so he enters this cave because after he talks to Reese, the woman that lives in that house, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but everyone thought she was dead, which I found really interesting, but she's just kind of been secluded, and she shares a story about, I think it was her sister, but somebody else, this woman living in this house, that saw how she lives, how she takes care of white people's dogs, and she ended up killing herself because it was too much. And I think that kind of shows what some people can take. And so I think it was just right after that conversation, Milkman decides to go to the cave and see what's there. He knows that his great-grandfather's body was supposed to be there. And I think even though gold is, like, leading him, it's leading him not to wealth and greed and riches like he thinks it is. I think it's leading him through his past. It's almost like these breadcrumb trails are going backwards, not forwards. But the backwards is actually what he needs in order to move forward. Because once he gets there, I mean, he doesn't see gold, but he does see a lot of his past. I mean, this was in a very historical place for his family. There was so many stories, I feel like, that were shared about this property that intertwined with Milkman's life. When he leaves, he is extremely hungry. I don't think that is a physical hunger. She emphasizes that it is real hunger, but I think it is that he has been so focused on greed and himself and this wealth, he actually didn't even realize that he was hungry and he was depriving himself of life, real life. So he immediately gets food, and then he starts to kind of think back and realize that Pilate has been here before and that he needs to go after her. And that begins to take him, I think, on a journey into maturing, into becoming a man into stepping up, into changing, and that goes into the other chapter. Oh gosh, it's hard to set up your phone on a typewriter. So I'm at 10 minutes, but I'm going to keep talking a little bit longer. Everyone who he interacts with when he goes on this journey, when he mentions Malcolm dead, they have this image, this identity of a good man in their mind. And I think Milkman's trying to hold them to that. He tries to give them reason to keep up those sayings like, oh, that's our man, that's Malcolm. And there's a legacy that is passed down through these men of certain things, because the original Malcolm dead, he is almost a godlike figure to these African American people in this town. And I think that Milkman, for most of his life, has wanted to break that mold. He wants to be his own person. He wants to get out of these barriers that have kept him. But when he went into the cave, into this place that is filled with his family, and there was no gold, there was no way to leave and get out of his family, his circumstance, the wording that she uses is free. It was almost a freedom to stay. I don't know if that's going to hold up or not, but a freedom to accept is what I saw throughout this journey. So that is my analysis of this chapter. I found it to be one of the most exciting chapters. I wanted to kind of micro focus into it because there was just so much there. It would be hard to talk about both 10 and 11. But yeah, I hope we can talk about it more in class. Thank you so much for entering my room and talking about books.